We now return to the Nevertomes.
Over the course of the millennia, innumerable cults have cropped up, promising spiritual enlightenment and greatness. Often misguided disciples would flock to a fanatical, often deluded megalomaniac. More often than not, these cults would fade into obscurity, or be disbanded forcibly. One member of a specific cult from the 17th century has gotten in touch with the Nevertomes and has provided us with insight. For this individual's safety, he has requested that we address him as Boris.
I had come to this group looking for something to believe in. If I had known or been told that I would actually see what I saw, I would have scooped out on eyes and soaked them in cognac.
Boris claims that in the 10 years he had been intermeshed in this mysterious group, their infant son stayed an infant, and the leaders never changed, never aged. Also, they were very reclusive, impossible to locate for any member underneath a certain echelon. To anyone's knowledge, in the village of Bordeaux, these two figures were utter phantoms.
I had come to know this man. He was unlike other cult leaders. He did not want anything from his disciples. Hell, the purpose of the cult was not even for their own profit. We were divided into higher and lower echelons. I found myself propelled past the level of meeting. I did not understand why. I got to observe the clandestine meetings. This man, he felt I could be trusted. Now don't get me wrong, the two of them, the man and his wife, they were nice enough, but something about them just not sit right with me. I always felt a sort of chill, like I could never feel calm.
According to Boris, the higher echelon members were hooded figures in what could only be described as fire-resistant robes. They were advanced users in the study of pyrokinesis, the mental manipulation of live flame. But apart from this one clue as to the cult's infrastructure, the puzzle is still undiscernible. What was their main goal? For the answer to this, we must take a journey, for the place we seek lies on the first star to the right of Polaris until sunrise. March of 1837, Copenhagen, Denmark. On the 15th, the date that would indeed live up to its weary legend as the Ides of March. 'Twas the last time I ever saw my sister Leah. They stole her from me. I guess, if you think about it, it was the other way around. Giles Chaim Morgenstern, age 17, found himself struck by a cruel twist of fate. For reasons that were lost upon him, he was spared the slaughter of the other villagers of their family's synagogue.
After being shanghaied from the town that he had known all his life as home, Giles had plenty of time to reflect on all that he lost, and the unknown path that lay ahead. For all he knew, he would be treading this path alone, for he had lost the thing that he valued most in this world, his family.
In the era that we did in Copenhagen, we weren't the richest of families, far from it. Whenever things were difficult, no matter what happened, I could always count on Leah, and she in turn could always count on me. I loved her so much. I loved her more than anything. I never even got the chance to say goodbye. I just felt so empty at the prospect of never being able to see Leah Morgenstern ever again. I always held out hope that I would, but somehow, some way, fate would guide me back to her. Usually, men my age, they leave to get away from their families. That was not the case with me. Leah was my rock. She was the one I could trust most of all with anything, any problem. She taught me never to be afraid to express how I feel, or that you're never too old to have faith in the unexplained. She always believed, and in turn I believed, not just because of her, but she was the one who instilled it in me. I never dreamed that the faith that she would give me would guide me throughout all of this to something so wonderful, even throughout all the adversity that I had to go through to get there. Leah, if you can hear this, I never forgot you. I never stopped loving you. I'll always keep you in my heart.
Giles was kept in solitude on board that ship. Barely any light, just enough food to survive. The timeline, according to Giles, is spotty at best, but the events that he was able to listen in on are as clear and indelible today as they were back then.
This man calling himself James Hook had this gravelly, domineering voice, full of rage and hatred. The room they kept me in was near the bottom of the ship, but I could still hear his demonic bellowing. What he said about why he singled me out did not make sense. Every time he or his detestable crew members so much as even took a breath of air, I felt such a deep-seated terror that my teeth would twinge.
Giles had ample opportunity to hear his kidnapper's rantings. Due to his differing dialect, most of it would be lost in translation, but 2 words were used more so often than others.
Buried treasure. That's all Hook's rantings about Giles apparently were, and possibly why all the other young men were held prisoner on that ship and were forced into labor when they hit land. That his belief in fae and magic was unparalleled. All the captors' faith was, and it was just enough to help the pirates reach the source of the treasure that they had sought to plunder. To Hook, fae treasure in his mind meant only one thing: riches with untapped magical power, the ultimate tool for world dominion.
In the mysterious, anomalous patch of sea known as the infamous Bermuda Triangle, the ship was believed to have breached the gateway and landed in the balmy seas that do not exist physically on this planet. Not long after they hit land, Giles was part of the away team of other captives and their masters to this mysterious island. A bump on the head on a palm tree in the inner geography of the island would bring Giles face to face with a girl when he came to.
I remember hitting my head against the tree. Something startled me. That part is all a blur. And also, how I was able to get from the lower part of the island to the bluff overlooking the waterfall. I was too stunned to even try to solve that equation right there. The answer was given for me in the form of my rescuer, as I would find out. She had introduced herself as Solon Fire, F-Y-R-E. The sound of her voice was so heavenly. It was scratchy, it was raspy. There's something about the cadence of her voice. It did something to me. And that was before I could even get a good look at her. She was flittering around in such a blue streak that I could scarcely make her out. I wasn't sure. I thought that I was dreaming, or I had gone to the great beyond. The throbbing pain that I had in my knees and the bump on my head were all the proof I needed that I was still among the living. Solon, she recognized me somehow. I'm not sure how, but it was as if she was waiting for me.
Giles had a hard time seeing what this girl looked like. She was darting around like a firefly that had downed an entire case of Red Bull mixed with high-octane espresso. She was drawn to him, and he was smitten with her. The Nevertomes elders didn't trust him because he wore the clothes of a pirate. But Solon sensed his innocence, and in this chance meeting, it finally all fell into place. She had literally dreamt of her true love. She had a sixth sense, and Giles's voice was the same one as in her premonition, and he had brown hair and brown eyes. It was a minute detail, but it was something that she had predicted. Queen Aurora knew that he was the one that Solon had pined for. Fate had taken a turn and dropped him into Solon's lap. Not literally.
What no one would realize is that the cult based in France and other parts of Europe, as a parent caste of pyrokinetic spellcasters, were established in reverence of the pixie and fae that Giles Morgenstern would awaken to on that fateful day. Across Europe, she was known as Fire de Soleil, but her name was Solon Natalia Fire, with the last name Pan, as in Peter Pan.
I had never seen anything like her. She was less than a foot tall, floating aloft on sparkling wings. Her voice was high-pitched, with a scratchy rasp to it. Her eyes, when one would look at her eyes, they would think she was demonic. But her eyes were her most angelic feature. Black scalari with bright white irises with no pupils. Not 2 minutes into first meeting her,
that I myself fell for her like a ton of bricks. She had me under her enchantment. Whatever she was feeling for me, I was feeling back for her. There was no rational explanation for how I was feeling about her. She awakened something in me, just like I had awakened something in her. It could have been faith-based, it could have been the way she looked, it could have been destiny. Whatever it was, I was in love with her, and she was in love with me. It was a gift from the universe to each of us, and we embraced it. I had only known her not even for 5 minutes, but my heart was hers. I wanted her to love me, and she did. She wanted my love. I gave it to her freely. It was a silent declaration, but it was loud in our hearts. I, Giles Morgenstern, was in love with Solon Natalia Fire Pan. It did not sit well with her Slivsonoft Peter Pan, or the Never Tribe. The only one who accepted me besides her was Queen Aurora herself, a woman every bit as charming and wonderful as Solon herself. No surprise considering that they were best friends.
Solon was a firecracker in the truest sense of the word, full of spirit and love. She confided in me a lot, that she had seen visions of the future and interacted with them like she had been a part of it. A lot of the things that she would talk about after these epiphanies would baffle us, none more so than me. Words like Wi-Fi, air hockey, Xerox, Decepticons, none of us could understand this language. We often thought it was because she used my brother's firewater as a mouthwash. One other youth, besides Peter and Giles, carried Solon's fervor in such a fiery fervor. In Western culture he is known as Slightly, but to Solon she always called him Sly.
And now, a special Nevertomes Mythbuster. We now return to the Nevertomes. Before Giles Morgenstern ever landed in Neverland Prime, there was one other boy who held out affection for the vivacious Solon Fire. He was none other than Peter's top lieutenant, the de facto leader of the Lost Boys, Slightly M. Zoyel, the brother of Nibs. He joins us now via Psycon to share what he knows of his long-lost friend.
She was always energetic, to be sure, and could often show signs of a fiery temper, but that was just a sliver of her. Solon Fire was a creature that radiated love like a nova. That day when Hook's ship docked in Neverland, I'll never forget it as long as I live. My brother Nibs and I saw everything that happened on the Never Beach, because the Lost Boys were too stupid to realize they should have stayed back. Because of this, that I will never get the chance to tell Solon what was really in my heart for her. That's one of the biggest regrets that I ever had. I had plenty of chances to tell her. Giles, in my opinion, is a very lucky man, and if he had lived, I would have been happy just as long as Solon was happy. But I know that she loved me back, in her own way. She was flirtatious and peppy, but she was more comfortable around me than she was with all the other Lost Boys. We did almost everything together. I think deep down she did know how I felt.
Giles's love for Solon was proven to the Never Tribe and Peter himself by warning of Hook's imminent attack on the coast, and defecting to the Lost Boys under the code name Tiger. Hook had reached land with a group of impulsive Lost Boys at the ready, not realizing the magnitude of the danger they were in. Giles followed Solon to the Never Beach to help Sly get the boys away to safety, but both were taken captive by Hook as Peter made his way to that same location from Aurora's palace. Would keep shanghaied Giles as a traitor. Hook took him as a hostage, demanding that Solon take him to what he thought was the island's cache of fairy treasure. Solon and Giles tried to disabuse the desperate captain of this delusion, telling him that those gold and silver pieces that he was looking for, that he had breached the gateway to Neverland for, was no different than anything that he would ever plunder on Earth, They contain no magical power other than an extra bit of spark. Fairy treasure in that respect was a blind to what actual fairy treasure was, something that James Hook himself would never figure out, but something that Giles Morgenstern had figured out the instant he laid his eyes on Solon Fire. Believing the so-called explanation of fairy treasure to be a deception, Hook continued to vent his rage on both Giles and Solon, as the latter too tried to keep the Lost Boys as far away as possible. Solon, though in fear of her life and Giles's, remained stoic and defiant, offering an ultimatum of her own. If any harm came to Giles, Peter, the Lost Boys, the Never Tribe, the royal family, or herself, what little magic she possessed would keep the crew of the Jolly Roger trapped in the Prime Never Zone forever. The Nevertomes will return after these messages.